This is the introduction or preface to the series Talk with God. The design of this series is to give you a set of very condensed practical steps that you can apply for when you talk with God and to help you understand when He's communicating back to you. A little bit of background. I was brought up in the Baptist church. That's my father's side of the family. I was exposed to Catholicism. That's my mother's side of the family. And what I learned there was really people like you and I did not have an expectation of having God talk directly with us. Now, there were really holy people that talked with God, like Billy Graham or the Pope or Mother Teresa, but I knew I was full of sin, deeply flawed, human. God was holy, perfect, and probably very busy. So I had no expectation growing up that God would communicate directly with me. I expect this to be a pretty common hindrance among people. So in this introduction, let's get into that first. Take your Bibles and go to Romans chapter 12. And in verse 1, we begin, therefore. Well, let's stop right there. Whenever I see the word therefore, I ask myself, what is the therefore there for? Chapter 12 of Romans is the beginning of the practical side of applying the doctrinal truths that we learn in the beginning of Romans. So a condensed version of Romans would read, first couple of chapters, convict everybody of sin. There is an answer to that sin in chapter 3, which is the faith of Jesus Christ. We go on to learn in chapter 5 of our personal identification with Jesus. In chapter 8, that there is no separation between us and Him. In chapter 10, we learn how to get converted or saved or born again, or call it whatever you want. Then we get to chapter 12, verse 1, and the word therefore. Strong's Concordance lists therefore as a conjunction, so it ties what preceded with what comes after. So it indicates that something follows from another. In other words, it's used in drawing a conclusion. Now, in exhortations, which fits this description, it shows what you ought to do by reason of what has been said. My simplified definition is because of all this. So therefore, Romans 12, verse 1, because of all this, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, number 1, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And verse 2, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed, number 2, by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. So we have 2 practical responses because of what we've been taught in Romans. Number 1, present our bodies a living sacrifice, and number 2, renew our minds to prove the will of God. Now, the word prove is significant. It's not just significant, it's also scientific. Strong's defines the word prove, dokimazo, as to test, examine, scrutinize as a metal, to recognize as genuine after examination, to approve or deem worthy. Now, I say scientific because, let me give you a simple example. If you were out gold prospecting and you found some ore you thought contained gold, you would take it to the assayer's office. What the assayer does is he melts down the ore and then he tests it to see how much gold is in it. Now, this process that the assayer goes through is called proving the ore. Now, when we think of prove, we think of, giving forth a good argument to convince somebody else that we're proving something. Now, that's not really this word. This word prove is to take it apart and see what good is in it. So we have a twofold response, and God will respond to what we're doing. Well, what's that got to do with communication? I mean, after all, we understand that all relationships are developed by communication over time. And if we want to know what the will of God is for our lives, Romans 12:1 and 2 have told us our part. Now, what about God's response, though? How is he going to prove it? How is he going to communicate back to us? Well, we have some options. Number one, and my personal favorite, a burning bush. Number two, we can open the Bible and pick a verse at random. Number three, we can wait for a well-meaning Christian to come along and tell us what they think God's will for our life is. Or, number four, we can hear from God directly. Now, my question to you is, if number four is discoverable and available, why would we need the other three? The whole design of this series is to give you condensed, practical steps that you can apply so you can get to number four. Here are the steps. Number one, believe it's possible and something God desires. Number two, it's already happened to you. Number three, develop the counterbalance, read and study. Number four, always be thankful, don't forget to ask. Number five, you will be slow to realize. Number six, think and reflect about what you experience. Number seven, it takes time to develop. Number eight, each of us is different. Number nine is a word of warning. And number 10, use what you've been given. So we'll start out with the foundation to talk with God, and that foundation is peace.